Today we are updating the Primal Rage guide. Been a while. You can get this gun from the wish machine by pressing G and buying the Primal Rage from there. We're gonna start off with the stats of the weapon and how it works. This gun utilizes two types of builds, crit or weak spot. Let's right click on the gun, click details, and X on a keyword. The gun utilizes fast gunner. When you trigger this skill, it can stack up to 5 times. And what each stack does, it just gives you 1% fire rate for 1 stack and 1% attack for 2 seconds. The gun can trigger fast gunner by just simply shooting. And here above your health bar, you can see the numbers increasing here. That indicates you have fast gunner active. You have a 35% chance to gain the stack when shooting. Now, when you're shooting with this gun, as long as you still have bullets, your HP will not be consumed. However, when you hit 1 bullet, the next shots you do will start consuming your HP, which will then you will get damage increased by 1% weapon damage every single bullet you fire. It can stack up to 80% weapon damage or 80 stacks. Also, each hit will restore HP equal to your fast gunner stacks. However, that doesn't really matter since we're going to be at 1 HP regardless, so there's not really much HP to restore. This gun really doesn't have any AoE damage, it's just a simple single target melter. If you go to my description, you will find a full link to the Primal Rage sheets, which will have everything listed. The calibrations you will want to put is of course assault crit rate for the crit version, and for the weak spot version you will want assault 2 times weak spot. So starting off with the first set that I actually don't really recommend anymore due to how annoying it is to survive with this, but here for this set you can basically use either 3 treacherous or 4 treacherous, and the last 2 pieces of armor is your choice. Instead of lone wolf, you can put whatever armor piece you want. You can see that we're using charmed mag top on every single preset, and that is the best armor piece since when you're going to be at 1 bullet you will have 40% extra chance to trigger an extra bullet. The Osa's mask will be worst option if you're going to be using that, and there's no point using it because we're going to be running savior set. However, what I really recommend is to run 3 pieces of savior instead right here, because 3 pieces of savior will basically generate you a shield every time you shoot a bullet. We have a 50% shield right now active, and whenever you lose that shield or get damaged, you're gonna keep regaining it as long as you're still shooting, which you're basically gonna be shooting forever. The only downside to it is that once the shield disappears, because the shield is temporary, so whenever your shield is about to expire, I recommend to just quickly summon your deviation to gain some of it back and then stack it up again by shooting. It is a very risky build, but savior does the most damage, so that's why I recommend using it. And since you get a shield every time you shoot, basically you're getting healed almost every time you shoot. So this is just better option for survivability versus treacherous. But let's start off with the mods. We're going to be using Precision Rush for bosses that are weak spottable. So here below, I explain what Precision Rush is good for. Best mod for weak spot build and mobs that have a weak spot to hit. That's basically it. So yeah, if you're doing like, let's say Dr. Mannheim and Leah Lab, you want to use Precision Rush because it has an exposed weak spot. If you're, for example, dealing with a Shadow Hound, however, use Shootout because the Hound cannot be hit in the weak spot during the invincible phase. However, you can still damage it during the invincible phase if you shoot at the tip of its head. That's where the weapon damage will count. However, weak spot damage will not count at all because it just negates it. It is most likely certainly a bug, but it's been in the game for, well, literally a year. They're most likely never going to fix it because they just don't care. If the mob doesn't have a weak spot, just use Shootout. That's it. For the helmet mod, you have 2 options, which is Weapon Symphony. And simply to put, if you're going to be marking a boss and swapping to your Primal Rage, which most likely 99% people are going to do, use Weapon Symphony. After you swap to your primary weapon, you will have 25% weapon damage and 10% fire rate, which for roughly, let's say 3 to 4 seconds, the damage will be higher than Momentum Up. And then Momentum Up, after shooting for like 8 seconds to 10 seconds, will catch up in damage to Weapon Symphony. But the burst damage with Weapon Symphony is insane, so just stick to Weapon Symphony for the helmet mod. Unless you don't have a good Weapon Symphony, stick to Momentum Up. Depends on which mod you have, has better substats. For the mask, we're going to be using Blitzkrieg, and simply, this is just the best mod because it gives you fire rate each stack, and it gives you attack each stack. In total, you get 10% fire rate and 10% attack, which is better than 10% crit rate and 10% weapon damage if you were using Explosive Barrage or Targeted Strike. Now for the gloves, you will want a crit boost. Not crit amplifier because this gun does not have really that much crit rate. If you check right here, you will have only 44% of crit rate. And if you get 15% crit rate from the Cradle, you will have 59. If you get 15% from Kukri and Crossbow Mark, you will have 89 crit rate. If you do the crossbow and the cookery combo, plus if you do the Forces Warfare Axe, then of course you can put crit amplifier, which you will still be capped over 100 crit rate. However, for most cases, if you don't do these things and these cookery shenanigans, just stick to crit boost as it will be more consistent. For the top piece, you will want rejuvenating, and this is the most important mod because we're using 3 savior pieces. If you're not using 3 savior pieces, let's say you're using Treacherous, then you can use Ardent Shield. But we're using savior, so rejuvenating is a must because every kill you will do, you will get a shield. Now, of course, if you're going to be bossing, this isn't really going to matter because rejuvenating is mostly for mobbing. You're most likely going to be going in the boss room and just focusing on one target, which is the boss, and not killing anything else. So the rejuvenating won't really do much here, but it's still just good to have. For the shoes, we're using Rush Hour. There's no better mod than Rush Hour because every 10% HP you lose, you get 4% weapon damage. We lose 90% HP, which gives us a total of 36 weapon damage from the shoes mod here. Some people ask, should they use Rush Hour or should they use Against All Odds? Well, literally Against All Odds only gives you 25% weapon damage after the stacking and together with the 10%. So I don't know why you would want to use Against All Odds, and I don't understand why people ask that question. So just stick to Rush Hour for 3 savior pieces. And lastly, for the bottom pieces, obviously we want Deadshot because we will get these stacks in no time and we never have to reload the guns. Literally the best option for the crit build. Now, every single preset for this has a click for details button, so if you want to see the full stats, you just click it, and here you'll be able to see all the mods here combined with its substats and its total stats for each multiplier. So it has attack multiplier, crit rate, crit damage, weak spot damage, weapon, and so on. So on the right, you will be able to see which mod needs what suffix. So for Precision Rush Gun, we have when in Fast Gunner, crit damage is 20%. When in Fast Gunner state, weapon damage, and gray ones for bossing. Gray ones is considered bosses, the ones that you fight with a big ass HP bar. If you're fighting an elite, then of course you want elite here instead of gray ones. And that goes for every single mod piece. On the Lunar top piece, you want the same crit damage, weapon damage, gray ones. On the Fast Gunner mask, you want the same. On the Deadshot Downstar pants, you want the same crit damage, weapon damage, gray ones. And of course, if you don't have Downstar suffix, which is this, just stick to Violent suffix, guys. It says here, if you don't have Downstar, if you don't have Lunar, if you don't have Crescent, stick to Violent suffix. With that out of the way, for the Rush Hour, it's the same substats. For the Weapon Symphony on the helm is the same substats. And for the Crit Boost Crescent, also same substats. Everything needs to have crit damage, weapon damage, and gray ones. The way you get Crescent suffix is by farming Lunar. And of course, the way you get Lunar suffix mods is you just farm the Oracle event in the Visional Wheel server. And then you can select which mods you want to open, Lunar suffix or Crescent suffix. And keep in mind, you want only Crescent on the gloves. Of course, you can also put Crescent suffix on the helmet, but it's not worth at all because the Crescent suffix only gives you 10% weapon damage total and 25% crit damage total, while a Lunar suffix gives you 12% and 30% crit damage. So why would you want Crescent on the helm? That's why you want it only on the gloves. And yeah, the priority to focus your substats is gray ones, second is crit damage, and third is weapon damage. Make sure when getting your mods to have gray ones. If you roll the mod that doesn't have gray ones, do not even upgrade the mod because you're going to deal less damage if you had crit damage and weapon damage both combined. First one, you need gray ones damage. Alright, and now if you check the attack multiplier right here, these are the food buffs that you will need to use: bland dish, orange juice, bourge deluxe, hot dog, and bone and sausage. All of them have rabbit meat. Now the way the attack works, I have 20% attack on my calibration, which contributes to this base damage. If we check our ammo type, we have precision ammo, which gives us 15% damage per shot, which is considered attack. Or if you were using purple, that's attack. And then our attack comes from the Blitzkrieg mod, which increases our Fast Gunner stacks, which is +5 attack as well. And then by default, Fast Gunner has +1% attack for 1 Fast Gunner stack, which in total, since we have 10 stacks, that's 10% attack. So since I am fully buffed right now with Pristine Rabbit Meat, which is 5% if you're using Pristine, that's on 2 food buffs, that's 10%. We have Orange Juice once with Pristine, that's 3%. Because creative cooking recipes turns out to be 3%, not 5%. We also have a Bourge Deluxe with a pristine rabbit meat, which gives you 5% when you eat it, not 3% because it's made in standard cooking. And then lastly, if you make a bland dish with peanuts and pristine rabbit meat, that's gonna be 5% of pristine rabbit meat plus 50% bonus, which in total is gonna be 7.5% attack. And for the orange juice, you just need to put 2 water, 1 orange, and the rabbit meat you want. I recommend putting normal meat because it's cheaper. It's an RNG to craft it. You can get the juice or the stewed meat. Now, when we sum all of these percentages up with our base damage of Primal Rage, which our base damage is 379, you have to check if it copper ammo. You can see that we have 604 attack. And this buff will stay until you relog or until you leave a silo and then you re-enter. You'll have to apply the buff again. But since we're using the gun as primary weapon, it doesn't really matter. You just have to shoot a bullet on any enemy and this will be triggered instantly. Anyways, the max 10 stacks we have 642, right? In the sheet, you'll be able to see a full list of the attack multiplier. So in total, that's 69.5. And if we just quickly did that, 379 multiplied by 1695, you would get 642 attack. It gets rounded down, so it would be 642. And you can see that clearly matches in game. So if you decide to use your food buffs with grade 1's damage, which is the deer meat, please do not, because you actually have to mark the target and you would be getting even less damage because this multiplier is higher than the attack multiplier. Now for the crit build, you will still want to have some weak spot damage because obviously if you put a Faithful Strike, you're going to negate all the weak spot damage, which in the end you will deal less damage. So you just want to have a little bit of a weak spot damage. You can see that the gun by default has 55 weak spot damage and you can get extra weak spot damage. 25% comes from this steady hand cradle perk, and then we have a marked strike. And you will want this cradle pieces, this, that, this one, and then fast pursuit. And now it comes down to if you want to be more tanky, use resilience. And if you don't want to be tankier and have more damage when marking, use bounty hunter. But if you're going to be bossing in a room when the boss can't really hit you, stick to this cradle. If there's going to be some mobs walking around, remove this bounty hunter and just put resilience on for some more survivability. It's personal preference. And if you're going to be using wildfire, then I recommend putting Bounty Hunter because you'll be able to get up to 15% weapon damage from just these 5 stacks, which is a nice damage boost. But again, if you're going to be using only crossbow to mark, that's only 3% weapon damage from this Cradle perk. Anything else, you will definitely want Deviant Energy Defense for some survivability and to get your Crescent suffix stacked up quickly, because when you summon this deviation, you will instantly get a shield like so. And as you can see, that means your Crescent suffix will be activating extra damage with that shield. And of course, if you do 2 more shots, your shield will keep generating more and more, which you will get these stacks higher faster. Now I will make a completely in-depth video about Crescent suffix mods, how they work, and explain them completely, but now quickly I'm just going to explain how they work. You get a flat 4% weapon damage when you equip the mod, and you get extra damage based off your shield. So right now we have 0 shield, and as you can see we have 159.7 weapon damage bonus. If I shoot once, it's going to go up to 160.3. So that was 0.6 weapon damage every single 5% shield we shoot. And of course, if you have like a purple substat, you're gonna get less damage increase because obviously it scales less. But for gold substats, that's 0.6%. You can basically take the extra 6% divided by 10 and you will get the number, you get amount for 5% shield increase. So for crit damage, you see it's 15% extra. Take that 15 divided by 10, you will get 1.5% every shield you trigger like this. Now, of course, the shield you get is 5%, but at some point, like at 20% or 30%, you will get like 3% crit damage because that's just how the game rounds numbers up and scales by HP. So don't freak out while you see like 3% crit damage increase after like 20% of shield each shot you do. That's just how it works. But you can see that the cap is 6% weapon damage, total is 10% weapon damage, and total is 25% crit damage when you reach the cap of your shield. Anyways, that's it for the crit build. If you go on overall now, here's the weak spot build. And for the weak spot build, you actually want to use precision rush, and you won't really be able to use shootout because, well, this is a weak spot build. If you want to use shootout, it's only going to work on a crit build really. So for non-weak spottable mobs, use crit builds like this. For weak spottable mobs or bosses, use the weak spot build. So precision rush will be the one you need. Weapon symphony stays on the helm, blitzkrieg on the mask, all the same. Weak spot damage boost on the gloves now, and the reason why we're using weak spot damage boost is because if you scroll down, you can see we have shitloads of weapon damage, 295 if you stack everything up, and weak spot damage gives you 25% on the gloves. If you're going to be using weapon amplifier over here, which will give you 15%, it's way less value, 10% less, and you're going to be doing way less damage because weak spot damage is lower in the multiplier. So we want weak spot damage boost on the gloves. Since you're going to be hitting weak spots anyways, you know, you're going to get more value from that mod. And then for the top piece, we have Rejuvenating, Rush Hour on the shoes, and Bullet Siphon on the bottoms. You're going to be getting 25% from Bullet Siphon. 5 times stacks of 4 is going to give you 20%. And by just equipping the mod, you will get 5% extra more from Bullet Siphon. However, keep in mind, if you're using Bullet Siphon on the pants, you see we have 28.5 weapon damage. And you cannot use a blue mag on the gun. You will have to stick to a gold mag because the Bullet Siphon scales off your mag, not the amount of bullets you shoot. So you can see now we have 28.5. And if I just reload my gun and then go back to 1 bullets again, we now have 32.5 weapon damage bonus, which 7.5 comes from the deviation that I have synced in. You will be left out with 25%, which is the highest damage you have. So if you're using Bullet Siphon or the weak spot build, just remember, put a gold mag on. Now for the ammunition, you will want to use precision for monoliths, bosses. In the Mannheim clip, I used precision ammo. However, suppression ammo works for them. So just use suppression ammo for silos, Leah Lab, and do not use suppression for bosses like monoliths because it doesn't work there. Leah Lab is considered a silo, so you can use suppression ammo there. Penetration for stylos as well, for Rosettas, Vultures, and so on. If you're poor, just use gunpowder ammo, the purple one. And yeah, for deviation options, you will want to use the Lunar Lone Wolf. Don't use the Bursting Magma Lone Wolf or whatever, because if you even have Crack Shot on it, you're not going to get the 5% damage from it, because the deviation needs to be released in order to get it. If you don't release it, you get no 5% weapon damage. But with the Lunar one, all you need to do is just sink it in and you will get a 7.5% weapon damage. Always, even if you don't release the Lunar Wolf. So we are using the Lunar Wolf on targets that are on the ground. If you are finding a flying target like Servitor, Manibus, or I don't know, anything that cannot be reached by the dog, use Zapcam Lunar. And anything that can be reached, use Lunar Wolf. That's simply it. And you can see that Lunar Wolf gives you 50% vulnerability for the weapon, which is a separate multiplier. It's from the deviation. And the Zapcam gives you 43.2. Lastly, for the hide, you will want to put Starfall Cowhide, weapon damage 8%, and when stamina is 120, you will get extra 8%, which in total will be 16% weapon damage. That's what you will put on your mask, and on the helmet, you will put Rabbit Fur. On the gloves, you will put Rabbit Fur. On the shoes, you can put Rabbit Fur as well, or you can put Lunar Rabbit Fur if you desire for more jump height when your HP is below 30%. Since we're always below 30%, you'll always have it. And then lastly, on the top piece, you put Rabbit Fur as well. That in total is 1, 2, 3, 4 rabbit pieces, and that's what's gonna get you this 20% weak spot damage while in midair. Every time you jump, as you can see, we have 60% weak spot. I jump, I'm in midair right now, we have 20% extra. When I land on the ground, you will lose it and it's back to normal again. So every time you're like spam shooting like this, you're always going to have that 20% weak spot damage as long as you're jumping. And on the pants, you can only have one wasteland, which will give you 20% max stamina. That's what you want to get the stamina bar, and make sure your weight is below 65 to also get even more stamina. With all of that, you should have this amount of stamina. Another thing is you can also use Lunar Wolfskin, which is actually going to give you even more stamina, 30% rather than 20% from Wasteland. Since your HP is below 30% at all times, you can use that. Hipfire movement speed and Sculpted movement speed 10%. Up to you, do you want sprint speed or do you want Hipfire movement speed, which is this? Or this. Anyways, ladies and gents, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. And of course, if you guys have any questions, you can always join my Discord and ask there or in the comment section. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and peace out.